What's happening, guys? Today I got a really special video for you guys. I'm going to break down the different types of slow-mo cameras that I've been using. I'm going to try to power through it as much as possible and give you guys as much feedback as possible in the comments below. So if you have any questions or anything, make sure you let me know. I'm going to go ahead and jump in this. The first thing I wanted to do was a drop test with the different devices, because a lot of you guys have been asking for that. I know shooting it has that shock and awe factor to it and everything, and arguably it makes a lot of people upset to see stuff like that. So I've been trying to throw some practical stuff in there for you guys too. Now, drop tests, there's so many different variables. No one thing is going to be exactly scientific unless I were to build up a rig that held the device and dropped it at a specific angle to ensure that it was flat, but devices never fall in a specific way for everybody. So I figured I'd just let the chips fall where they may and see how this stuff goes. So the first thing that I did was a drop test on dirt. Now again, there are no perfect scenarios. You could drop something on dirt. This is dirt with gravel in it. It could be 100% gravel. Who knows? This has a little bit of a mixture between little rocks here and there and little pea gravel, but for the most part, this is dirt. Jumping into slow-mo, all the slow-mo stuff I did on this was with the Rated RR slow-mo camera. I think these are around 6,000 frames per second. I do that so I can get full resolution. I can get full resolution up to about 12,000 frames per second in 720. Now I did this with the iPhone 5C and the 5S, trying to give a litmus test between the two. I don't know. For the 5C, it actually held up pretty well. It bounced off the ground, it did a full flip, and no scratches, no cracks or anything on the dirt test. Yeah, you get the dirt particles bouncing up there and it does a full flip, passes the test on that. So the next test that I set up, again, this is only one camera, the Rated R slow-mo camera at 6,000 frames per second. I put it in a 24p timeline and ended up having to ramp it because 6,000 frames per second is pretty fast on that, or pretty slow. It's a pretty high frame rate and pretty slow in a 24 timeline. Now, looking at the slow-mo playback on this, it does look like the weight of the device hits on the corner of that as it's hitting the concrete, and it does crack that, does a few bounces there, and then the close-up of the device breaking. Now, something I was wanting to do is a drop and a water test. Now, I know there's a lot of different ways that you can take and power off your device right away. You can use different types of tricks and techniques with alcohol and stuff like that to try to absorb as much of the water as possible. For me, I didn't have a whole lot of time because the time was of the essence for the shoot. So I took and I set it out to the side. I film out in the desert. It's about 115 degrees out there for the most part, setting it out in the sun with as soon as I pulled it out of the water, I turned the battery off, or as soon as I pulled it out of the water, I turned the phone off and set it out, and it ended up working after that. So both with the iPhone 5S and the 5C were fully submerged in water. I immediately powered them both off, let them sit for 15 or 20 minutes outside after the screens have been cracked on both of them, and they still function properly. So that was nice to see. I did the bowl of water so you could see the device dropping into it and then me grabbing it out as fast as possible. I was going to do something crazy like a toilet test or something like that, but that doesn't have nearly as cool of a factor to it, being not being able to see the phone go down into the bowl like that. So jumping into the camera shootout here, I had the GoPro Hero 3 Plus Edition, the iPhone 5S, both of them shooting at 120 frames per second. Now in real time that looks kind of weird and doesn't look like slow-mo. What you have to do is you have to actually put it into a 30 frame per second, 60 frame per second, or 24 frame per second, whatever kind of timeline you're going to edit it in, and either conform it from 120 frames per second to whatever you're editing in to get that slow motion effect. For me, it was 120 frames per second conformed down into 24 frame per second timeline. So that's what slowed it down and gave it that kind of cool factor. If you want to check out, I'll put a link in the description. I did the GoPro Hero 3 shootout between the Hero 3 and the 3 Plus. There's some really cool stuff in there with slow-mo and everything if you want to check that out too. So moving on, I have the Red Epic camera. That camera shoots up to, depending on what model you have, some of them you can shoot up to 400 frames per second. It might be faster. It's one of those cameras where it's constantly changing. It's actually really cool. I remember when I was doing the drone video, that week it went from 300 frames per second to 400 frames per second just with a software update. So that was kind of cool. Granted, it's a really expensive camera to get frame rates like that. If you really looking for a camera in that range to do far as slow-mo and everything, you can save a lot of money by going the FS 700 route on the Sony and everything. And then moving along, we have the rated RR slow-mo camera. I can shoot up to 1 million frames per second on that. I'm working on some prototypes that can shoot up to 10 million frames per second. So that camera is just a hybrid of a bunch of different companies that I've used in the past. I used to rent a lot of slow motion cameras, and I just got tired of one setup and using this company's proprietary software. So I digress. Let's go ahead and pull up the first round of shots here. All right, so what I did on this was I stood the phone straight up. I wanted to, when you take and you shoot it down long ways, it just completely wrecks the device. I love that shot. It's really cool. You get a lot of fragmentation, which is great for slow-mo. Traditionally, when you do it on the 2D plane, the X and the Y axis, where it's really flat, the bullet just goes through so fast that you don't get a lot of fragmentation. I set this up. Let's go ahead and look at the first one here is the GoPro. 120 frames per second. And you get a little bit of a mist and looks like a wood chip or something falling there. We'll go ahead and throw the iPhone 5S up there. Now the focus and everything on the GoPro, now granted this isn't raw footage, I color corrected this just a little bit for all of them. I might show you the raw footage here. Where it's somewhat flat, so you can crush the blacks a little bit more, maybe pop the saturation or something like that. But the focus is really sharp. On the iPhone 5S, same thing. It doesn't shoot flat. It already does all the saturation and everything, so it's a little bit more difficult to color correct if you want to make a lot of changes. And looking at the slow-mo, again, yeah, you see the chip falling off and just like a burst of smoke out the back. Not a whole lot of fragmentation. And then the red camera, the Epic, shooting at 300 frames per second here. Again, you really don't see a big difference between the red footage and the GoPro and the iPhone far as particles in the slow motion timeline. Now the image itself, I mean, there's so much more you can do with the red footage, especially shooting raw when it comes to color correction, exposure, and all that other stuff. Definitely a superior image, but far as being able to catch particles and stuff like that, it's not that much different. Now pulling up the rated RR slow-mo camera. Now I love this because you can almost see the bullet spinning coming in, and of course you see the particles and everything. I actually see as the bullet is starting to exit, you see the SIM card fly out the side of it, and that's pretty cool. Fairly good shot too, going for center mass on that guy, and you see the little AT&T SIM card flying through the air. So yeah, I mean that's just something you didn't see on the other two. Not a whole lot of particles to it to begin with, just because the glass and everything going out the back. But as far as the second shot's concerned, the GoPro footage, again, it's fairly flat as far as color design's good. I actually prefer that. Some people, if you're filming, keep in mind, if you're not going to color correct stuff, there are a lot of auto settings that are really good to have on the GoPros. Go ahead and play through that, see how much we catch as far as the particles and stuff are concerned, because there's definitely a lot more on this. So going through frame by frame, generally that's what you have to do on 120 frames per second, is just like 1 frame, 2 frame. So the very first frame that catches any part of the destruction, pretty much everything is already flying apart. It's got about 3 foot, 4 foot spread on it. By the next frame, everything is just, it's leaving screen. The body, there's 1 frame of the body in there, and then the rest of it's just the little pieces. So that's pretty good. Now the iPhone, unfortunately, I screwed this up. This was my fault. I walked in front of it, and I don't know if it focused on me and pulled the focus off of the camera or what, but for the sake of slow-mo, we'll still go through this and look at what's happening with the particles in the background. This was operator error. This obviously wasn't the phone. I should have checked it before I walked away on this side of camera, but first frame, it's pretty much the same thing. You're getting the particles as they're flying about 2 or 3 feet away, one shot of the body, and then that's it. And everything's kind of dancing around in the sky there. You get about 20 to 30 frames of decent particles in there before everything's exited screen. Now, as far as the red camera is concerned, first frame you get the destruction, you get the particles. Second frame, the body's still in there, glass and everything. That's actually pretty sharp too. So it's a fast lens that I'm using, so we're catching a lot of stuff. 300 frames per second, that looks pretty good. It's not the fastest, speed out there, but it looks really good as far as still images are concerned. So here comes radar slow-mo cam, and then you get about 10 frames of the bullet coming in, and so the very first frame of it entering the body, you get fragmentation off of the frame there, bouncing off the wood, and you actually see the body expanding while the bullet's inside of it. That's kind of cool. You see that bulge inside of it, and then of course the battery just exploding all over the place. And what's really cool is the particles on the back side. The bullet is pushing the particles, so you get this this trail effect of the particles following the bullet out, which is really cool. I dig that, and of course the bullet's tumbling and everything. A lot of people, they don't realize how much a bullet can change trajectory just off of a slight impact with anything. All in all, I think it's a good example of showing people the differences between frame rates. Now keep in mind, when you are doing this stuff, when you record at higher frame rates, be it with your iPhone, with your GoPro or whatever, make sure that you conform it to whatever you're editing, from 120 frames per second, 60 frames per second, to whatever you're editing in, whatever your timeline is. So if it's 30 frames per second or 24, that way you get that slow motion effect. Because a lot of times people will drop something like that in there and be like, I don't understand, it's not doing the whole slow-mo thing. So just FYI. So if you guys have any questions or anything like that, make sure you leave a comment below. Let me know any suggestions that you might have on some stuff that you want to see. Don't forget, new episodes every single Monday on Rated RR. See y'all next time.